Super quick video on my first impressions of the Sony RX1R Mark III. El Tres. In order to get a really good feel for this camera, I actually rented its predecessor, the RX1R Mark II, because I actually loved this RX1R Mark II. I bought and sold this camera at least twice, but ultimately didn't land on it as my everyday carry a couple of years ago because of the atrocious battery life and also the weird auto white balance choices this camera would make, resulting in some weird colors and kind of bad skin tones. But I often said, if this camera just got a better battery, maybe a joystick, it would basically be my perfect everyday carry camera. Its super tiny size and lightweight just made it feel like it could be a great everyday companion. If it only had enough battery to stay on long enough to be a companion, right? So, as I said in my first video on the topic, I was super excited when Sony announced this guy, the new version Mark III. I think this is the right comparison, comparing these two cameras, because I think Sony kind of created its own category with this camera. I don't think comparing this to the Leica Q2 or Q3 or the Ricoh GR series makes sense. If anything, maybe the camera this should be compared to is the X100VI from Fujifilm. So this guy is actually closer in size to the Ricoh GR3, you can hold it in the palm of your hand easily, than it is to say the X100VI or the Leica Q2 and Q3. So I think this is sort of its own little category of hyper small, almost pocketable cameras. Whereas the Q2, Q3 are bigger, you got to carry it around, full frame, everyday carry cameras. That's kind of more the camp of the X100VI. And then the Ricoh GR3 is truly pocketable, right? It doesn't have the full frame sensor. It doesn't have the killer lens. So it kind of slots in between the two categories of the Ricoh pocketable point and shoot cameras and then the Leica kind of bigger, heavier duty, everyday carry cameras. Kind of an interesting place in the market landscape, in the product line landscape for this Sony RX1R Mark III. So having said that, how does this compare to its predecessor? In terms of image quality, this is a little bit better. I can only open the RAWs from this camera in the Sony Imaging Edge software. Capture One and Lightroom don't have the update yet for this camera. So, I'll do an update video on the image quality, but as it looks now in Imaging Edge, it's pretty close, but it seems to have slightly better colors, slightly sharper images, a little bit more detailed, slightly higher megapixel sensor, same kind of rendering. Maybe it's because it's hitting focus more and more accurately, but the images look a little sharper and cleaner than this guy, but overall fairly similar. Oh, I should mention, I didn't test video. I've only had the camera for a day or so, and I'm traveling tomorrow, so I just didn't have time to really do a proper test between the two cameras. But I don't think that's really what it's about. You don't buy these cameras for video. They don't have IBIS, So, you won't get to see how bad the video is in the old version because I'm sending it back to the rental house, Lens Rentals. But I will, in my longer review of the RX1R Mark III, get into the video part, so stay tuned on that part. In terms of build quality, I think this is pretty well built, but I like the way the predecessor was built way more. It feels more metallic. It feels like it's totally made out of solid metal, although I think they're probably made of the same material. It's just like the coating on the new one that feels like a little more plasticky. I think it was a real miss to take away this cool pop-up viewfinder and the flippy screen from the predecessor version, leaving an EVF just attached to the back and then a screen that does not flip at all. I think that was a real miss. I think the viewfinders might be the same in these two cameras. It's certainly the same resolution, 2.36 dots. But the fixed back screen in this camera is much better, much brighter, higher resolution, 2-point-something dots versus 1-point-something dots, I believe. The buttons on the new guy feel a little bit better, especially the back wheel. Although I'll say some of the buttons are a little mushy and they could have improved them or made them slightly more different sizes or, different heights or something, so it was a little easier to figure out which button you're pressing when you're looking through the viewfinder. And then they also got rid of this awesome autofocus, manual focus, autofocus mode selector dial, which I think adds a lot of charm to the camera. I don't mind how they made the buttons flush to the top of the camera in the new one. That actually feels a little bit more slick and modern. And then the lens is the same lens. So the aperture ring is the same clickiness. You know, the macro ring functionality is the same. In hand, the new guy feels a tiny bit heavier, but like pretty negligible. I'm assuming it's just coming from the larger battery. Like that's how little the difference feels in hand. I think the grip is about the same. I like that they've made the record button on the old guy just a customizable button on the new guy. Another thing these cameras share in common that I think they could have improved upon is that they both only have one card slot inside here next to the battery, and it's a regular USB-C Type 2 card that goes in there. I feel like they could have made a slot for their newer Type A cards, but not a huge deal, just something I noticed. And then, as I said in the beginning of the video, the downfall of this camera really was the battery life. And while the battery life of the new guy isn't fantastic, you can just kind of tell from the size of the battery how different they are. Like literally, the battery life is like this much better, 3 times better than the old one. And you can just tell by the size of it. It's just got way more capacity, right? So, which one between the two of these did you get? I think it's a real shame that Sony got rid of the pop-up viewfinder, or at least didn't give us like a 5 point something dot EVF here. It doesn't feel like an improvement. It feels like a little bit of a downgrade almost with this EVF. And the back screen, even though the resolution is better, also feels like a downgrade because it doesn't flip out. But this has got way better autofocus. It's a faster, snappier camera overall. It's got Sony's slightly improved color science. And most of all, it has the big old battery. So for those reasons, I probably will stick with the new guy, and that's probably what I would get. But man, do I wish Sony had just kept this form factor, made the bigger battery, put the latest autofocus in it, maybe even put the stack sensor of the A1 Mark II, or just the updated 61 megapixel sensor, and then just left everything else the way it was. Because like hardware-wise, form factor-wise, this was kind of perfect, minus a joystick. Whereas this has way more trade-offs, and that's kind of a bummer. It feels like a little bit of a step back. But overall, because of the super fast autofocus, the portability of this, I'm still going to give this a shot. I'm leaving to Ireland tomorrow, so I'll make a longer video about this camera after the trip, because this is the only camera I'm going to take on the trip. So what do you think? Do you think the older version is better? I should just, get 10 of the batteries and camera in my pocket and maybe manual focus more because the autofocus isn't nearly as good on this? It's fine, but it's not as good. Or am I making the right decision, going with the newer guy, going for convenience, even though it's not as fun and quirky as the original or the predecessor model? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.